For this demo, let's settle on the well-known pet store example. Let's imagine for a moment that the first step of the API design thinking process led to this rough definition of the customer needs. PetStore is a company selling cuddly toys online. They would like to open up a marketplace to let partners resell the pets. Ideally, orders have to be placed through an API so that the whole process can be automated. Some partners of PetStore express the need to be able to discover the PetStore inventory whose item can be added to their catalog. Some other partners want to have the checkout process managed for them, from cart creation up to the checkout. A last group of partners wants to do both. The rest of this demo will be split in three parts. In the first part, we will go through the API ideation process to design two products, one to discover the inventory, one to place an order. We will then go through the API prototyping step to expose our two products as live mocks. Finally, we will compose both products as a unique API, expose it through the API management, and gather feedback from our early adopters. Okay, let's start the API ideation process. So in this process, we will create two possible API design, one for the inventory and one for the cart. So let's go in Apicurio and create a new API design. Let's call it Pet Store Inventory and start from the Pet Store example, which is provided out of the box. I can click Edit API and review the existing design. So since it will be mainly about getting the existing inventory, I don't need this operation to create a pet. So let's just delete it. And I don't need to delete a pet, so I can remove that operation. So now I have an operation to get the list of all the pets and an operation to get the detail of a pet. Okay, I think we can call it done for the inventory. Let's create a new API design. This time for the API, the pet store cart. Pet store cart. And let's create it from scratch. I can edit the API. I will start by providing a data type. So let's start with the cart data type. And we'll give a sample JSON for that data structure. So my cart will have an ID, which is a number, an owner, which could be something like John, string, a status, for example, pending, and a list of items. So and it will be items ID. So for example, item number 1 will be in that cart. Great. Let's click save. And so as we can see, Epicurio created the data structure for me. And I can now add a path for my first operation. Like, let's say we want to do a cart slash new to create a new cart. That will be a post operation. It will be used to create a cart, and the operation ID is create cart. Could be new cart. Um, there is no request body. Just go and add a response. The response is a 200, and it will return JSON and the cart data structure. Okay, good. Let's add a new path, slash cart slash ID slash add item. Um, so this will be also a post operation. Um, it will be used to add an item to the cart. The operation ID will be add item. We need a path parameter. Um, that this will be the cart ID. The type of the cart ID is an integer, and there is this time a request body, because to add an item, we need to give as input the ID of the item that we want to add. So it will be some JSON, and let's be simple, just pass the ID as an integer. And let's add a response that will be 200, and it will be JSON, and let's return the cart, updated card data structure. Great. Let's finish by adding the last operation. So slash cart slash ID slash checkout to complete the process. So let's create the post operation. It will be used to check out the cart. The operation ID would be check out. Let's add a path parameter. It will be the cart ID. The type is the cart ID is an integer, and we don't need any request body for this one, just a response. 200 is fine. Let's add a description and a media type, application JSON, and we will return the updated cart. Okay, good. Everything seems fine. So good. So we have our two APIs design, one for the inventory and one for the cart. So this concludes our first step about API ideation. Okay, let's continue our demo with the API prototyping step. So in this part of the demo, we will add some meaningful example to our API design and expose live mocks of our design to start playing with it and getting feedbacks about it. So let's start with the pet store inventory. In Happy Curio, I'm editing this API contract and reviewing the operation, which is named find pets, which returns all the pets available in the inventory. As you can see, one example has already been defined with 4 pets in the inventory. And if we have a look at the operation which is named find pet by ID, this operation has already an example given, which is to return the first pet of the inventory, which is named Zaza. So if we go back in Apicurio and hit mock with microx, we can send that mock, that information, in fact, to microx that will create a mock based on that design. So if we have a look in microx at the pet store inventory, we can see that microx found our two operations with our examples and created a live mocks for us. So let's play around with it. Um, yeah. So I'm getting the list of all the pets within the inventory, and I get my four pets, Zaza, Tigress, Maki, and Tufik. And if I want to get the details about Zaza, which is the first pet that we have in the list, I can get the detail about Zaza. So um, our mock for the pet store inventory is complete. Let's go back to Apicurio and try to define some example for the pet store cart. So let's edit our API and start with cart, the create cart operation. So we will add an example in the response. So we can ask Apicurio to generate a sample data structure for us. Oh, yeah, sorry. Um, it would be named John Cart, let's say. Yeah. So we can generate some data structure for our operation. So let's put some meaningful data in it. So our cart ID will be 123. Let's pretend. Uh, our owner will be named John. The status of that cart for the time being will be pending. And there will be there will be no item in the cart when the cart is created. The cart is empty. Let's just copy that data structure for later use. Good. So we can now create a cart. Let's add an item into that cart. So I will need to define an example for the cart ID. So if we reuse our John cart example, the ID is 123. That's what we decided before. And we need to define an example for the response. So it will be John cart, and the response will be still pending. But let's say we want to add an item in our cart, and that item needs to be Zaza. Zaza was the first pet in the inventory, so let's add the Zaza item ID in the item list. And we also need in the request body to define an example. So um, John cart, and this time that's the Zaza ID. So Zaza ID is 1. That's the first pet in the inventory. Good. So let's move to the cart checkout operation. Let's define an example for our cart. So it's always John cart. Our cart ID is 123. We have no request body, so we can just move on to the response and define an example. So it's named John cart and add a response. So dot cart during the checkout. So first, let's make sure we stay consistent. John has added an item in its cart, which is item number 1. And since we are doing a checkout, we'll mainly change the status of our cart and change from pending to closed. Okay, so everything seems good. We can just mock that API using Microx. If we go in Microx, we can discover in the service list that there is one more service, which is the pet store cart. And Microx created a mock for us. Um, so let's have a try. So let's clear that and do a curl on that URL to create a cart. Oh, and that's, by the way, that's a post operation. So we create the cart with ID 123, the owner John, and the status is pending with no items in it. Let's add an item in that cart. So let's do add item, and we need to specify the cart ID. So cart 123 slash add item. That's a post operation, but we need to pass some data. So data is application slash JSON, so we need to specify it. Content type application slash JSON, and we need to pass the item ID that we want to add in the cart. The item ID is 1 because we want to add Zaza in the cart. Perfect. So my cart now has an item in it, which is item number 1. And let's do a checkout. So cart 123 slash checkout. That's always a post operation. Okay. Okay, perfect. Now my cart, which has an item in it, is now has its status changed from pending to closed. So that's all for the API prototyping step, where we defined some meaningful example for our APIs and created a live mock for our APIs. So in this part of the demo, we want to get some feedbacks about the product we built so far. And we want to get that feedback from the early adopters. So one way to get feedback is to use an API management solution, because the API management solution will tell us which consumers is using what and how our API consumers will consume our services. So it's a very good way to get some insights about the API usage and as well as to get some general feedback. So let's create two backends, one for the pet store inventory and one for the pet store cart that we will compose into one product, which would be named pet store. So let's create a new backend named pet store inventory and give you private endpoint. So you can get the private endpoint from the mock URL um, and just copy paste that URL and paste it in the private endpoint. Um, so you can remove the last part of the URL depending on what you want to achieve. So let's create that backend. Okay, let's add a mapping rule to enable anything that is a get on that backend. Now let's go back to the dashboard, create a new backend and call it pet store cart, pet store cart. And same private endpoint is the mock URL. So let's copy paste this and um, create that backend. Let's add a mapping rule to enable anything that is post on that backend. Good. And go back to the dashboard and create a new product. Um, so let's call that product the pet store. System name could be pet store. So let's start by creating an application plans that will be basically the contract that we have with our API consumer, how much they can consume from our product. So let's create a silver application plan and a gold application plan. And now create a client application so that we can run an end-to-end test a bit later in the demo. So let's create an application, pick the silver application plan. We'll call it the pet app. Good. Great. So we can now move to the settings part, switch to Apicas self-manage because my API gateways are deployed on my environment. The URL, comes from my OpenShift environment where I deploy my API gateways. So let's just save this and oh, by the way, I will change the credential location to HTTP headers, which will be much easier for me. Okay, good, good. So let's add our two backends. So let's add the inventory backend that will expose on slash inventory and add our backend pet store cart that will expose on slash cart. Good. We can now create some methods to keep track of who is using what and decide on inventory or cart, which one is the most used. So let's create a cart method and let's create an inventory method. Sorry, inventory. Let's map everything. So a get on slash inventory will be mapped to the inventory method. And that's another mapping rule. A post on slash cart will be mapped to the cart metric. Um, good. Um, let's go to our configuration and review that. So we have some mapping rules. Um, the credential location will be the HTTP headers. Um, we have two backends. One is pet store inventory and slash inventory. And another backend, which is the pet store cart exposed on slash cart. So we can, I think, promote that first version of our configuration to the staging gateway. Um, we now can test our staging gateway to make sure that everything is working correctly. So, uh, so let's query slash inventory slash pets to get the list of all my pets in my inventory. Um, and yeah, we get a response. It's not very pretty, but let's do something better. Yeah, that's much better. So if our configuration is working, I can just promote that version to the production gateway. The production gateway usually needs about a minute to get its configuration refreshed. So let's wait a couple of minutes to get the production gateway working. So we will query that URL production. Okay, so our production gateway seems to be working. So um, we can start playing with it. So as you can see, we can get the list of all the pets in the inventory. Um, we can query a pet to get the details about a pet. So here is the first pet in my inventory, which is named Zaza. Let's say I want to buy Zaza. So let's create a cart slash cart slash new, and that's a post operation. Um, Good. So a card has been created. A card that has ID 123 belonging to John and in status pending with no items in it. So let's add Zaza to that card. Card slash 123 slash add item. It's a post operation. We need to pass some content. So we need to specify some content type, application slash JSON, and we need to give the Zaza ID, which is ID number 1. So let's add Zaza to our cart. Yes, our cart has been updated, and there is now one item in my cart, which is Zaza. So let's proceed to the checkout. Cart slash 123 slash checkout. And that's correct. My cart has been updated. switch to status pending to closed with one item in my cart. So we are good so far. So if we go back in the API management interface, we can have a look at the analytics and discover how API is used. So as you can see, I have twice more requests on the inventory part rather than on the cart section of the API. So that's one way to get some insight about the usage of my APIs. I could also go to audience and navigate through the applications using my API. For example, I can see that whoa, that application is using a lot my pet store API. Another way, not necessarily shown in that demo, is also the developer portal that helps create an ecosystem around APIs and get feedbacks about the deployed API. So, so that's all for this demo.